Tonight, the status of the national debate on gun control. We'll take a look at what the people want, what the politicians want, and what the NRA wants. Also, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, he shares his thoughts on gun control, what's going on Capitol Hill relating to it, the status of DACA, and the shift memo that was released just this weekend. Then, the situation in Syria goes from bad to worse. An Academy Award-nominated documentary tells the story of a group of people who are saving lives instead of killing people. We speak with their director. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We're going to talk about that, also the CPAC event and where it means for the Republican Party today. But we begin tonight with the continuing debate over guns in America, that in the wake of the Parkland High School massacre that happened on Valentine's Day. Now, there's been a lot of proposals floated since the 17 people were killed there just less than 2 weeks ago. And tonight, what we're going to do is we thought we'd do a state of this. We're going to run through all the major proposals. We're going to tell you what the public wants with all the latest polls, and we're going to give you the positions of all the major parties and players, including President Trump's desire to arm teachers. Well, the president, he spoke about that idea yet again today, and he also added this thought as well.
You don't know until you test it, but I think I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon. And I think most of the people in this room would have done that too.
As easy as that is to digress from that thought and his military record, I will press on. Those imaginary heroics aside, what is the status when it comes to gun control and school safety in this country, the debates, where the popularity or the, let's say, disagreement lies? And to answer those questions, and there are many of them, we wanted to dig into those major proposals being floated right now to see where the public stands on this, and also, as I said, where the key officials, including Democrats, Republicans, the president, and the all-powerful NRA. And for the answers, let's turn to our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. And this is really a scene setter here, because in the next coming weeks and months, this will get ramped up in many ways. But where are we now?
Well, and especially because we haven't seemed to coalesce around any one or two ideas or proposals here, Rich. So we wanted to take a look at all of them. And for this analysis, we looked only at public opinion polls taken since the Parkland massacre. And where large groups like Democrats or Republicans are concerned, we did our best to gauge the general sense of those groups as a whole, noting that some individuals within each party are likely to buck their party's trends. First up, greater gun control as a whole. Averaging 3 recent polls, we got that 67% of the public supports more gun control. And while the public is a yes on gun control, Democrats are a mostly yes, Republicans are a mostly no, and both President Trump and the NRA are solid no's. Next up, enhanced background checks. 86% of the public say they wanted that in 3 recent polls. So do Democrats. Republicans are a no, but that may be changing after Parkland. The president says he wants beefed up background checks, but only on mental health issues. The NRA is a solid no. Banning bump stocks, that was the device used in the Las Vegas massacre. A ban has 56% support in a recent CBS poll. Democrats want a ban. Republicans, for the most part, don't, but that may also be changing since Parkland. President Trump says he now supports a ban on bump stocks. That change also coming after Parkland. The NRA remains a solid no. There's strong public support for a waiting period to purchase any gun to the tune of 83%. Democrats mostly support a waiting period, though none are pushing legislation right now. Republicans, the president, and the NRA, they all oppose the idea. Next, a push to ban gun sales to the mentally ill. 82% of the public supports the idea. Democrats agree. Republicans have opposed the idea, but that is one of these positions that may be changing. President Trump, since Parkland, now backs a ban on the mentally ill having access to guns, but he repealed a regulation that would help do that 1 month after he was sworn in. The NRA's position on banning gun sales to the mentally ill is unclear. In their eyes, it depends on how you define mentally ill. Should you have to be 21 years old to purchase a firearm? 71% of the public says you should be. Democrats get a mostly yes on this one. Republicans get a mostly no. President Trump is hard to read on this. He keeps talking about the idea, but he only says that it will, quote, be considered. The NRA is opposed. Another idea being considered is a ban on high-capacity ammunition magazines. 63% of the public say they support a ban. Democrats agree. Republicans mostly disagree. And the president and the NRA solidly disagree. Some interesting positions on whether to ban the sale of all semi-automatic weapons like the AR-15. 60% of the public supports the idea. That's taken from 5 different recent polls. Surprisingly, Democrats as a group get a mostly no on this, and none have proposed any serious legislation recently to ban assault weapons, though several Democrats are vocal backers of an assault weapons ban. Neither Republicans, the president, nor the NRA support the idea. From those proposals that are strictly about guns and gun sales, let's pivot to proposals about school safety and mental illness. Should schools have armed officers in them? 58% of the public says yes. Democrats have varied stances on the idea, often connected to what areas of the country they represent. More Republicans like the idea than oppose it. President Trump and the NRA support armed officers in schools. Arming teachers in schools, 50% of the public opposes the idea. Democrats are a mostly no here, though some do support it. Republican views vary. President Trump and the NRA emphatically support armed teachers in schools. And finally, should there be more funding to deal with mental illness? This one feels like a no-brainer when you look at the public opinion polls. 87% of the public says yes. So do Democrats. Republican lawmakers and President Trump both say they want more funding for mental illness, but the recent budgets have actually reduced funding for it. The NRA's position on this one, not clear. Rich?
All right, Andrew. And joining Andrew and I is Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, and also senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. And we go to Jeannie for all things polling. Historically, give me a sense, but it feels that this time's a little different. I'm sure I said this 5 years ago after Newtown, but it seems that certainly interesting players, the governor in Florida, he seems opposed to the idea of arming teachers in the classrooms. He seems supportive of the idea to raise the limit, to raise the age to 21, to buy, if not all guns, certainly some guns here as well. And maybe a couple other initiatives that normally he would have been an emphatic no. Now, I know that's his state and everything else, but I've seen a lot of people take interesting positions on this. Is it my imagination, or do you get the sense it's different than when we've polled after other gun tragedies?
I think a couple things are different. I don't know if it's going to result in legislation, but I think a couple things are different. Number one, I think the fact that these victims of this horrific shooting have been able to go out, speak for themselves, lobby the government both at the state and the federal level, and have such an important voice. If that momentum keeps up, that, I think, is different. I mean, unfortunately, in Sandy Hook, they were babies. Right. They couldn't speak for themselves out of an elementary school. So that, I think, is different.
I'm curious. You're on a college campus. They talk about this being millennials, and obviously, you know, kids in high school that will make their voice heard. March 24th, there's going to be a national rally in Washington and 50 other cities across this country. On the college campus, and it's not scientific, but do you get the sense that it's carried over there, too?
I do, and of course we are. It's interesting because we are in right across from New Rochelle High School, which had the horrific
Sure.
3 stabbings in a week, and so this has, you know, so I don't want to say this has really resonated, but the combination of those two things, it has really resonated. The students are talking a lot about it, the administration, the faculty, the staff, and they're having forums on it. So it has been something that's been talked about an awful lot, and I'm not sure which is, you know, what explains it, because we are very close to that,
Sure.
the horrific incidents. But the other thing I do think is a little bit different is the fact that we have a Republican president and we have a Republican Congress. And I have always been of the opinion that if we were going to make movement in terms of gun control, it's going to come from the right. Now, I'm not confident that the president is going to push for full throttle gun control, but he has been open to a few things, banning, you know, the bump stocks, you know, maybe people under 21 not having the weapons. So I think that we probably have a better shot of at least a little bit of movement on it because he's a Republican.
And also, there's no one that they can blame if nothing gets done, because they control.
They have to do something.
All of this.
A couple of interesting takeaways from the numbers as I was going through them. Where they were measurable, where we also had similar polls coming after Sandy Hook, the bounce in support for gun control and specific pushes, things like banning semi-automatic weapons, a bigger bounce after Parkland in support of that ban than there was after Sandy Hook. You know, same thing with some of the other waiting period and other issues like that. I also thought it was a little surprising that Democrats were a little bit behind the public on some of these issues. It caught me a little off guard that the semi-automatic weapons ban was supported by 60% of the public. Nobody on the Democratic side is pushing for it. I think they don't want to be seen as going too far in a ban that would somehow not appeal to
And if
more
we remember
moderates.
5 years ago to that point, Andrew, and we'll talk about this with the congressman next segment, there was a thought that maybe the president should have been more involved, although leaders, then President Obama, although Democrats said, let's try and handle this legislatively. So he listened. We can debate whether that was the wise move or not. And the other thing was, some people said the Democrats try to get too many things, and maybe they overstepped
and
on
we may
that.
be seeing the application of that lesson from the post-Sandy Hook period. One last thing. On school safety issues, the public appears to be at a position where they're like, we'll try anything at this point. I mean, I think there's a sense of exasperation or desperation from the public, and there may be some wiggle room there for Democrats in a negotiation with Republicans.
And I do think, while you're right, and Jeannie, you pointed to an earlier poll even last year, where the idea of arming teachers, I'm shocked at how many people aren't opposed to the idea, including people I know in my personal life that I respect, that are saying, why not? Something's better than nothing at this point. And I said, really? We're going to go to that degree? But I think once they learn how long it would take to train teachers, how much money it would take potentially do that as well, and all the rest, I think the appetite, I believe the appetite might go down. But I just mentioned money. I believe there's another thing at play here that may make the NRA, if not stand down, temper their threats to lawmakers in the Republican Party or break ranks. Take a look at this graphic. Now, these are companies who are threatening or have to step away with financial support for the NRA. And I should also mention, there's more than 21 when you count, and obviously national brands you all notice. More than that, there are a lot of financial institutions, BlackRock, for example, that are making sure and are looking within the next 24 hours, starting from this morning, about do they have any investments in any gun-related companies, and if so, the implication is there'll be major divestment from them. So to me, Jeannie, that brought back South Africa. And when there was apartheid, what really changed it at the end of the day? American and global corporations said we're no longer going to do business anymore. That was more than as much as social unrest and all the rest happened. All of a sudden, the almighty buck drove change here. I think if that's what's going to happen here, just like it's driven certain talk show hosts when they went too far, they're no longer advertisers would come on the program. That may drive some of the movement here as well. We'll see if that follows, but I thought that was interesting.
No, I think you're so right, and I think what will happen is that the NRA may be forced, if they want to keep corporate sponsorship, and they do need it, to temper some of their positions. So they may be forced, or at least some of their members may move in that direction. And we should also say that, it's these corporations, they were still with the NRA after Sandy Hook and after the horrific incident at the, out in Arizona and in Las Vegas rather, and at the dance club and down in Florida. They still remained with them after that. Is stunning.
One thing, Andrew, you mentioned it, but what surprised me in the numbers you brought out was how many Democrats, on the Hill at least, whether it's for strategic reasons or that they've been burned before, or maybe they're as cynical as many of us are as to what can and can't be done. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do that approach longer. I want to play a soundbite. This is from Governor Cuomo from New York, and obviously you can argue he's got his own political ambitions that go beyond Albany here, potentially 2020. But nonetheless, listen to what he had to say.
They misdefine the problem. The problem is not school shootings. The problem is school shootings and shootings in malls and shootings in nightclubs and shootings in concert halls. It is a societal problem. I would like to see the National Democrats, frankly, put forth a real bill that defines the problem in actuality and defines a legislative solution in actuality rather than starting to talk about, well, the best we can get.
Two schools of thought. Just one politician laying down his marker. He doesn't have to try and get legislation passed in Washington. He gets to do it from the state capitol. Or that this idea right now, hey, whatever we find, we got to get bipartisan sponsored legislation out of this. So there's an R and the D on it before it'll go to the Hill potentially for a vote. If Ryan or if McConnell will even let us vote on it, that's another approach. Do you think in the end that's more likely, or do you think they really do try and do incremental steps?
I think you're going to see both at the same time. I think Cuomo is sort of taking the lead among likely Democratic candidates for president in 2020. You'll see others who are sitting in Congress right now, Gillibrand, Kamala Harris in California, and others they will probably strike out for a more leftward position on this and look for more as opposed to all this. But it's a matter of legislating and what can you actually get done given the current makeup of Congress. So I think you're likely to see two versions of it, two ways.
In an election year with the midterms in November.
But for the next few weeks, you'll see what can we get done. And then after that, they'll go into campaign mode and start hitting with the laundry list of things they'd like to get done.
Finally, before we go to break, I just want to show you a picture. And this is, right now, Trump's already got his re-election organization, campaign already set up. And this is what they're fundraising off of. And listen, a week ago at this time, I was giving the president compliments for at least trying to have the debate and at least trying to promise to challenge the NRA for things. He's using a photo of him consoling a victim at Parkland. And if you read in the fine print, he's trying to raise money off this.
There have already been Parkland students who objected to it.
The foolishness of him saying he'd run barehanded in to have stopped the shooter. And then there's that. It goes from the surreal to the offensive, frankly. All right. By the way, I want to bring you into our conversation here. So this is what I'd like to do. Our question is, what would you, I don't care what your politics is, what would you like to see Congress do? So on Thursday, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and I'll be taking your calls on this. You see the toll-free number there on the screen. I'll keep reminding you throughout the course of the week. But Thursday night at 6 o'clock, I'm letting you have an equal vote here to any lawmaker on Capitol Hill. Tell us where you'd like to see this debate and, frankly, the policy in this country be when it's said and done. All right, coming up next, we're going to get the perspective from Congress. Can it do anything on the subject of guns? Will Democrats and Republicans ever agree on anything? Well, New York Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney will join us with his perspective.